So as I said, I'm Dr. Catherine Horton. I was born in Transylvania, which is part of Romania. My parents are ethnic Hungarians and Germans. In the mid-1980s, we fled communist Romania to Germany. I completed my entire school career in Germany, and I skipped year 9 on merit, came top of my year, which allowed me to go to Oxford to study physics. So between the years 2000 and 2004, I was at Hertford College in Oxford. I finished with a first class Masters of Physics. After that, I did a PhD in Oxford. The name for it is DPhil, but it's exactly the same. And my PhD was in experimental high energy physics. Right. After that, I became a research fellow at St. John's College, Oxford. And I was there between the years 2008 and 2012. And part of my research was, for example, at CERN, but I also worked at the German accelerator laboratory DESY in Hamburg, which is the German electron synchrotron. So I'm a high energy physicist. Before I proceed, I would like you to give you proof that I really was a fellow at St. John's College, Oxford. I'm not just saying it. Remember, it's also under oath. But now you also have written confirmation of this. And when you become a fellow at Oxford, what most people don't know is that you don't actually get a work contract. It's still the old boys network, probably just a tip on the shoulder at some point, and you just turned up. And it's very much kept like that. Of course, the entrance requirements these days, if you become a research fellow, have completely changed. So hundreds of people applied, and eventually I was selected by a panel. But you still don't have a work contract. So the only thing you get is if you request it, and only if you request it, a letter, a confirmation letter by the college office that you indeed were or are a fellow at that college. So what I will show you now is this precise confirmation that I requested before I left Oxford, just so that I can prove, later on that I really was there. It was completed, or it was actually given to me on 9th of August 2012 by Joy Axtell, who was the college office, head of the college office. She was the college office administrator, that's the official title. And what I did, so this is a copy of the original letter, and I'm showing you a copy because I blacked out my date of birth, and that's because it's still used by banks and other places as a password and things like that. So I don't really want to make that public, but I'll show you this letter. So this is what it looks like. That's St. John's College, Oxford here. That's their contact details should you want to confirm this with them. And this is the date, 9th of August 2012. So you can see that was about 2 months before I left at the end of term in 2012. So Oxford has 3 academic terms. And it says, this is to certify that Dr. Catherine Horton, date of birth, scrubbed out by me. Yeah. Maybe you can see it better like that. The paper behind is employed as a full-time junior research fellow in physics at St. John's College, Oxford University. St. John's College, University of Oxford for the period, can you read that? 1st of October 2008 to 30th September 2012. Stamp St. John's College, signed Joy Axtell. Okay, so you can call St. John's College and confirm that indeed I was a fellow there. And there's this, you know how we've got this rivalry between Oxford and Cambridge. And essentially, if you're at Cambridge, then they don't have junior research fellows, they just have research fellows. And if you're at Oxford, they make a distinction between did the college pay you or did an external grant body fund you. And if it's the college, if it's actually a college fellowship, you're a junior research fellow. And if the funding came externally, you're a senior research fellow. And, traditionally there used to be just differences in seniority, but these days really not always. But anyway, so if you're from Cambridge, you will recognize this as the research fellowship. And the people from Oxford always have a chip on their shoulder, and some people wanted to change that. We also, so my full title was junior research fellow at St. John's College. So there we are. After that, so during that time, I worked in high energy physics. After that, I did a brief project in medical physics, and then I changed to study the physics of human systems, and that's what I did for a very long time. on and off. So when I was at St. John's College, I did that for the entire last year of my fellowship. And after the end of my fellowship in 2012, I moved to Germany, where I joined my husband, who was a researcher there. And I tried to start to bootstrap a startup. And this was intended to help people get back into work, especially if it was foreigners coming into the country and not having any connections, or maybe having a different level of education, or their education certificates not being recognized. And I wanted to build a platform where these people could be integrated really quickly into the employment market, and maybe even create new jobs through that. Unfortunately, at that time, I was already being harassed, and this entire endeavor was sabotaged, systematically sabotaged. I mean, to the point where I couldn't really continue pursuing that, especially when it's a startup and you're in a country where you haven't. Well, I grew up in Germany, but I didn't have any business contacts there. If you're under the sort of harassment I was under, this sort of task becomes essentially impossible. So I tried for about 2 years to actually do that. And in the end, I just realized I have to give up. So I think when did I start? Well, I started, as soon as I left in autumn 2012, I spent a couple of months actually drawing up what I really want to do in detail. And then we moved to Munich, and that's where I really launched this thing, or launched the effort. So we were there starting in spring 2013, and I was working on this pretty much until the entirety of 2013 and 2014. And then at the end of 2014, I realized I just have to give up this endeavor. It's just impossible. And what I did then after that is that I worked in wealth management briefly. I was very interested, so I got into the physics of human systems first, and then I started this startup endeavor, trying to use my insights from systems analysis, and trying to map out how the labor market is going to develop. And then when I couldn't do that, I went back to systems analysis, and I got interested in currencies and what is happening with currencies. And then I went to a wealth management firm that was actually specializing in gold, and trying to give people, to companies and so on, extra stability, actual wealth management by investing in gold. So, actual really core base, emergency backup for pension funds and for companies. So I was there very, very briefly, because after that I realized that what I really wanted to do is actually work with complex systems and think about how to improve them. So with complex systems, I mean anything, companies, big institutions. They are run these days according to principles that they are very intuitive, but they're not always very efficient. So what I did then after that is that I went back into studying systems analysis specifically for complex human systems. It was basically my private research project. And then we moved to Switzerland, and when we're here, I launched a consultancy for essentially systems analysis, or the analysis of complex human systems. And again, I was sabotaged, and then I started being assaulted in January 2016. And since January 2016, it has essentially become impossible to do my work because I'm being assaulted hourly. So this is why I went to the court. I'm desperately trying to have this stopped. It's ongoing. In fact, the attacks on me are getting ever more insane. But I will leave that to a separate video, so you can get the details of the abuse separately. Hello, I'm Dr. Catherine Horton. I would like to explain in this video remote neural monitoring. And I'll just give the very, very basics, so that when people approach you and they say, I'm a victim of remote neural monitoring, you don't just write them off as crazy or something like that. And to understand what they're saying, you have to know a bit about very, very modern technology that's currently being literally trialed on people. So the person who approaches you and might say, I'm a victim of remote neural monitoring, just like the victim who might approach you and say, I'm a victim of organized stalking, or I'm a victim of microwave weapons. You have to know what to look for. You have to know what the current status is of science and of weapons technology to be able to assess what they're saying and put it into context. Because if you do not understand the context, these people might be saying something that actually exists and you just write them off as crazy, which will mean that you are not actually there for another human being who's approaching you, begging you for help. So that's why you have to understand these things. It is, I think, your civic duty to do so. Even if it's scary, even if it sounds out there. So I will do my best to explain this technology, but you have to know that this technology is more or less classified. So what we do know about this technology are patents from the 1970s, and there are some patents that are stem from the 1990s, which have expired. And whistleblowers have come forward and they've actually said this technology is now being used on people in an illegal fashion. So crimes like that are being committed with a known technology, and the actual effects might be scary. So I'm not going to, swamp you with the patents. You can find them yourself. I might put a link down there. What I want to say is roughly describe how this technology works. And I will be very hand-wavy, so all the real key experts, don't just stomp on my head if I'm imprecise, because what I would like to do is explain it to people who maybe do not know anything about physics, okay? And nothing about technology. So essentially there's this new thing, this new capability that we have, which is called remote neural monitoring. And what it essentially is reading out your brain functions remotely. And you can, as you can imagine, if you could read out a human being's brain remotely, you can probably also perhaps influence it remotely, and that's exactly the problem. So when victims come forward and they say, I'm a victim, they might be the victim of a horrific crime. That's essentially absolutely a world premiere, essentially. This sort of crime has never been there before. It's never been seen before, and that's why law enforcement, lawyers, judges, and doctors might have never heard about it, because it's actually using very modern technology. What it is at its core is essentially the following thing. When you are, for example, moving your arms about, or when you're thinking about a certain topic, when you're processing information, like whatever goes through your eyes, on your ears, and you're hearing sound, or you're seeing colors, or you're seeing images, and then you're reacting to them, or you're doing sport and you're moving your limbs to play volleyball or whatever, play football. This is all done with electrical signals inside your head. And every electrical signal is like a small current running along on the little wiring in your head, if you like, and along your spine, and these signals are sent into your arms and your limbs, and your brain is wired up so everything can be steered. When I'm moving my fingers, it's essentially all steered through my head, through my spine, through this neural system. Okay, but what you essentially have is electrical signals traveling. But every single electrical signal is a little electric current, a little pulse traveling along, a conductor, if you like. Now, every single time current runs along a conductor, it generates an electromagnetic field. Always. It is impossible to send current without the moving current generating an electromagnetic field. And this is, kind of radiated off, and it's broadcasted off. So if you manage to read out that field, then you can reconstruct the strength of the current and in what direction it's flowing. Do you see? Now, what you can do, if you just had a wire with current on, you could measure the field, and you could tell that there's a current running along. And you could also tell